Hello and welcome to Booked and Buzzy. I'm Annie Mazes. I'm joined here today with Christopher Vicari, Laura Piper Lee, and Jenny Holiday. Thank you for joining us today. Everybody will get a recording of this event and an Edelweiss collection of all the titles that we talk about today. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Annie. Hello. Yes, I am Chris Vicari of Union Square and Company. It's great to see all of you here today, and it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Laura Piper Lee enjoys making people laugh, flirting, and avoiding exercise. So writing romantic comedies like Zoe Brennan First Crush and Hannah Tate Beyond Repair is a perfect career choice. Today she will talk about her next book, Hachette. Let's call it a spicy stoner romance that blends the humor of the TV show Broad City with today's popular issue of the legalization of marijuana as a chronically ill woman takes on the surly doctor next door with their fraught pasts and feelings for each other becoming too hard to ignore. Hotshot rolls onto shelves in May of 2026. Joining us from beautiful Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, please say hello to Laura Piper Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me on Booked and Buzzy. Since I am here to talk about my adult stoner rom-com, it makes a lot of sense why you thought of me for this, Chris and Annie, so I appreciate it. So first, I'm going to give you the context for why I wrote Potshot. Then I'm going to tell you what the book's actually about. So the first thing you should know is that I grew up in the 1980s, and absolutely nobody was paying attention to the television that I was watching. I mean, zero supervision. And this fostered a love of stoner comedy in me at a very young age. And so there's just something so endearing to me about temporarily stupid, exceedingly gentle, giggling idiots just trying to have a good time, man, and then getting into trouble and not being in any kind of headspace to get themselves out of it well. Some of my favorites are Super Troopers, Grandma's Boy, Friday, Dude, Where's My Car, which you know is going to be a good time based on like title alone. But even before those came out, I was watching like old Cheech and Chong movies. So I have to reiterate, nobody was paying attention to my television watching. And fun fact, Potshot's cover is actually inspired by an old Cheech and Chong movie poster. Not the first one, but one of their later movies. And so I think that's pretty cool. But even though those comedies were a lot of fun, the parts for women in them were just absolute sexist trash most of the time. Women were portrayed either as like really annoying killjoys that are just tapping their feet, waiting for the men to like get their act together, or just sex objects with zero personalities that for some reason were attracted to doofuses. Just not great for women. It really wasn't until Broad City came out in 2015 that we saw women depicted as the gentle, temporarily stupid people having fun with pot. And I loved that show. So Potshot definitely shares some DNA with Broad City if you're also a fan. But it's not just the sexism in stoner comedy that has not aged well. The other main thing is that usually the plot would have something to do with a fight against the man, whether it was, you know, trying to get away from police or trying to procure drugs illegally. But that plot driver just doesn't make sense in a legalized country. And now, you know, with over half the country having legalized cannabis, it just doesn't make sense to forward the plot. So that's where Potshot comes in. It is my ode to stoner comedy, but brought to date. It is feminist, it centers women and women's pleasure, and it takes place squarely in the times that we're in right now, where cannabis is legalized in most places, but still pretty stigmatized, especially for use by women. In fact, when I first had this idea a few years ago to write a book about a woman with Crohn's disease who wants to open her own cannabis dispensary, I was talking it over with a good romance author friend, and she told me, listen, like marijuana is the third rail in romance. You don't touch it or you die. And I thought that was rather extreme, but I was like, okay, I didn't know. But when I thought about it, I couldn't name one book where I'd seen pot like depicted at all, pretty much. And so I didn't submit the idea. But then I was reading some Emily Henry books, as one does in the romance world, and I noticed that she would throw in these little like one-off moments where her characters would smoke pot, and she wouldn't make a big deal out of it, but that's what they were doing in that moment. And I thought, hey, Emily Henry has cracked the door open here for cannabis and romance, and I'm about to kick it wide open. So thanks, Emily Henry, for that. So Potshot combines all of my favorite aspects about stoner comedy, but updated for now with small town romance. And if you're familiar with my earlier titles, Hannah Tate Beyond Repair and Zoe Brennan First Crush, those are also small town rom-coms because I find just endless humor in the small town rom-com setup. When your relationships and the drama from them can like literally span decades, there's tons of wacky side characters, and your leads are often grappling with their place in the world and their careers. That's just perfect for me. I really love it. And so I had a really good time combining stoner romance with small town romance. It also has a very personal through line about what it means to live with chronic illness and how that can affect how you open yourself up to love. So, like Nomi, who's my female lead character, I have Crohn's disease. And like Nomi, I had a really hard time finding good supportive doctors and healthcare that made a difference in my quality of life. I think that many people who are struggling with chronic illness, whatever kind it is, can relate to that. The medical industry is not the friendliest towards people who have difficult to solve problems. So I processed a lot of my complicated feelings about being very sick with an inherently private condition that when things can go wrong can become horrifyingly, mortifyingly public. And how you almost develop this like desperate need for privacy, and how that can put you at odds with the type of vulnerability you need to open yourself up to new relationships. So now that I have given you the context, I can tell you a little bit about the book. Nomi, my main character, she is maintaining a delicate balance with her Crohn's disease and the inherent stress of opening up her first business, which is going to be a cannabis dispensary. It's going really great when the book begins. It would be for both medicinal and recreational use in the charming hometown, bougie Sparrow Nook, New Jersey. And so if I have any folks that are familiar with South Jersey, Sparrow Nook is a fictionalized version of Collingswood, which is right across the bridge from Philly where I live. So Nomi is this close to getting the final approval for her dispensary from the city council when Julian D'Angelo rolls back into town, who was her high school rival with benefits, in a relationship that ended very, very, very badly 15 years before. So sidebar, I love a story when a high and mighty person has fallen and has to come crawling back home to reinvent themselves. And that is exactly what Julian has to do. He was top of his class in medical school. He was the recipient of a prestigious fellowship. He's widely regarded to be one of the best emergency medicine doctors coming up. But if he has to be nice to a conscious patient, he's doomed. He's done for. He cannot manage it. So after just a royal screw up at his prestigious hospital in Philly, Julian is placed on a 6-month probation and sentenced to work in like the ultimate customer service position, which is a primary care physician in a family clinic. The only place that will take him, though, after what he has done, is his own childhood doctor's clinic back in Sparrow Nook, his hometown, that he hates. Julian is a very difficult person, and he has never fit in there, and he is generally widely disliked, especially by his own giant South Jersey Italian family. So he is not happy to be home. Julian also has some really big emotions around cannabis. His father was, disabled and out of work and used cannabis when he was growing up. And then his father died when Julian was young. So Julian has a lot of misplaced anger towards cannabis and the role it played in his father's situation. So when he finds out that a dispensary is slated to open next door to his family clinic, to be operated by none other than Nomi Wyeth, his high school crush that he's never gotten over, he loses his damn mind. Like he just goes crazy. With all of this misplaced anger at cannabis and Nomi, Julian just declares war against this dispensary and does everything he can to try and keep it from opening. And this is where my comparison to Parks and Recreation comes in, if you're familiar with that show. I love a small town, ridiculous feud. And I had such a good time writing this. Like Nomi and Julian are duking it out at city council meetings, zoning hearings, fundraisers, just all over town. And I had a really good time writing hyper local New Jersey government and like absolute weirdos that work there. Super fun. Just as their feud reaches like fever pitch, they come to an impasse though. Julian is forced to shadow Nomi to learn more about cannabis if he is going to be allowed to complete his probation, which he has not been doing well at. And Nomi needs Julian to drop his complaint against her dispensary if she's ever going to be able to open. What follows for them both is a really satisfying period of growth. Julian's eyes are open to all the good medicinal and recreational cannabis can do, while Nomi learns very, very slowly to open herself up to Julian as their feelings morph from rivalry to grudging respect to friendship and then eventually love. This book was so much fun to write. It's both an exploration of my very complicated feelings about chronic illness, but also the funniest book I have ever written. It's also extremely hot, in my opinion, and it was my first time writing dual POV. And that resulted in me writing Julian, which is just the most down bad, insufferable baby girl of a man that you will ever read. I adore him, and it's been really fun to see readers reacting to him so positively, because, you know, at the beginning it is dicey. He is not the best dude. So come May 19th, if you are looking for a contemporary rom-com that will truly have your readers laughing out loud, but also striking a very emotional chord about chronic illness in the medical industry, and the most enemies, that was my timer, and the most enemies to lovers setup you can possibly get away with in a contemporary small town rom-com, please pick up Hachette and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Laura. Really appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Jenny Holiday. Jenny is a USA Today best-selling author whose books have been featured by the New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, the Washington Post, and NPR. She grew up in Minnesota and started writing when her fourth grade teacher gave her a notebook to fill with stories. When she's not working on her next book, she likes to hike, throw theme parties, and watch other people sing karaoke. Thank you so much for being here, Jenny.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's really a thrill to be here. I am supposed to talk about my book, and maybe I will a little bit, but it was also suggested that I could share some library stories. When Annie said, Jenny, do you want to meet a bunch of librarians? And I said, well, yes, I do, because in my house, we love librarians. I come from a line of librarians, which I'll get to, but this very morning, my husband, who was just back in town from being away, so we've been ships in the night. He said, what are you going to do today? And the backstory here is that he is a academic researcher. He's a social scientist. He doesn't really do anything traditionally associated with literature or anything like that. But he has one of his grants, one of his long-term research projects. He's co-investigator with a bunch of academic librarians from all over the country. I live in Canada. And once a year, he meets with the librarians, and I swear to God, it's he calls them my librarians, and he loves them. He thinks they're the greatest researchers because I don't know, I won't get it all into it, but it's kind of a long-standing joke how much he loves his librarians. So this morning we were catching up, and he said, "What are you going to do today?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to meet with my librarians." And he went, "What? What?" So I one-upped him. So thanks for letting me be here and for a day call you my librarians. So I do come from librarians, my closest aunt and godmother and my mom. My mom just died actually, and I said I wasn't going to do this, but I have trouble talking about her without getting emotional. But she made me a reader, and I grew up in libraries because of her. Both her library and the public libraries that she took me to. She was a school librarian, and she was a hard worker, I guess, and in retrospect, probably a bit of a perfectionist. I would go on the weekends to her school library, and I liked nothing more than she was kind of cutting edge at the time. I also grew up in the 80s, Laura. I also grew up mostly unsupervised, except when I was in the library. Kind of weird, but she had like the first scanner in the school district. So she would let me check the books in because the students would leave the books, I guess, somehow. And then they all had to be checked in mass. So I liked nothing more than to spend my Saturday mornings going beep, beep, beep. But she also opened a new library in a new school. And I guess she had the scanning technology, but she also still had card catalogs. So she would pay me a quarter for like to alphabetize cards for the card catalog. And she had this contraption where it was A to Z, or Z, I guess, if you're speaking American. And we would sort the cards that way, and then you'd alphabetize within each thing. And I just loved it. But the greatest library story about my mom is the time she went to war with the librarian at my elementary school. I went to a different school in a different school district, and my school had two librarians. They job shared. So there was a morning librarian and an afternoon librarian. And the morning librarian, who was the one on duty when my class went to the library, did not allow us to check out what we called chapter books until we were in a certain grade. I think it was third grade or something. So we would go and we would have our lesson, or she would read us a story, and then we were able to go check out books, but only picture books. But my best friend had the afternoon librarian, and she was allowed to do whatever she wanted. So she was evangelizing. I can still remember the title of the book was called Primrose Day. It was by Carolyn Haywood. And I wanted that book so bad. And I must have gone home, I don't remember the context, and told my mom that I wanted this book, but I wasn't allowed to check it out. I don't remember her immediate reaction, but she did leave her school early, or maybe she went in late because it was the morning librarian. I don't know. Anyway, she marched into that library, and I wasn't there. I probably would have died of embarrassment, but had words with my librarian. And after that, we were allowed to check out whatever books we wanted. So I got my book. And as an adult, I think about, you sometimes see those librarian action figures. My mom had one of them. I think of like the librarians doing battle, and it warms my heart, and it makes me feel so lucky that I grew up in a house where reading was valued, reading was fought for when it needed to be. She used to also take me to the public library, and in the summer we'd get a stack of books, and I used to read in a tree in our backyard, and I'd rigged up like a pulley system with jump ropes and a tote bag, and I pull the books up that way, and then I would sit in the tree and read, which was actually really uncomfortable, but I think I had kind of like an Anne Shirley fantasy, like I was, just a girl reading in a tree. But then my mom would come, and because she was a school librarian, she was off in the summers too. She would bring snacks, and she'd put them in my tote bag, and I would haul them up. But the funny thing, and I am getting to my book, the funny thing about my mom is that she was not a romance person. I mean, I loved her. I still love her, but I would say that she was a little bit of a literary snob. So she never really read my books. I think she read a couple of them. My dad, who recently passed as well, was my big sort of career booster. And my mom was just kind of like, maybe you should try YA. And she would sort of gently try to get me to do something else. So it was always like a little bit of tension, a little point of tension between us, like loving tension. So fast forward to my next book, which is called Book Club Boyfriend. I early on decided that I was going to dedicate it to my mom. And I thought, ha ha ha, now she's going to have to read it. But then she died, so she didn't have to read it. And we're a family that like really does gallows humor, dark humor. So my sister and I, like that still cracks me up to no end that she got out of reading the book that she would have had to read. Anyway, Book Club Boyfriend comes from a couple different places. One is, and I will date myself as an 80s person here too, is if you're old enough, you'll remember when Oprah Winfrey, who kind of had the first celebrity book club, televised book club, invited Jonathan Franzen to be in her book club. And I can't remember the details of it, but he did say yes, but then he sort of started trash talking the types of people that would read the Oprah books or the types of books that Oprah chose, and she uninvited them. And it, spiraled into a feud. I think they made up years later, and he did come on her show. But that, I wasn't writing then. I probably wasn't even aspiring, but that shocked me to my core. I could not believe that an author would get invited on Oprah and then, you know, get him do stuff to get himself uninvited. So that always sort of stuck in my mind. And to be clear here, I'm not ragging on Jonathan Franzen. I think he maybe is, you know, one of the top 3 or 5 writers of our generation. I am a big fan of his books anyway. So my last book had which was called Into the Woods, had a secondary character who was sort of a grumpy, reclusive novelist. And we didn't see much of him. But in my mind, I kind of was like thinking of the sort of the cranky Franzen, and you used to read about how he would write with earplugs in, and he needed total silence. And as I became a novelist, I was writing books in front of Blue's Clues, and I was balancing a day job and kids, and I was sort of the exact opposite of that. So it always sort of stuck in my mind, and I kind of modeled the character a little bit off my idea of him, but I never planned to do anything with it until I started hearing from readers after Into the Woods that they wanted a book about Jack, who is in fact the grumpy novelist. And I thought, like, immediately, I thought, I could do this. This could be like, and it's not, to be clear, it's not my Franzen and Oprah romance, but it's my grumpy novelist and cheerful Hollywood producer. So in this book, our female lead, who is a successful actress turned producer who has a book club that runs on a morning show and on Instagram, invites a literary novelist who's just made a huge splash with his debut novel to be featured in her book club. He says no. And that would seem to be that. That's all like happens in the first few pages. But for a series of reasons that the great Sarah MacLean would call romance reasons, he ends up needing her help with his second book. And he ends up temporarily relocating to her pool house in her backyard to write said book, which he's having trouble with. He's afraid that he's a one-hit wonder. So there's the grumpy, and he's from Minnesota. So there's the grumpy northern literary novelist, suddenly fish out of water, displaced into sunny LA to try to write a second book. So it's very much opposites attract, or I wouldn't really say enemies to lovers, but rivals to lovers. My editor calls it enemies to lovers adjacent. It's out in July, and I think that people who love books will appreciate it maybe more than anyone else will, because it's an homage to why we read and what reading does for us and how reading can bring us together. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you for sharing those stories about your mom. Now we are going to do a quick big book buzz. Chris and I talk to you about a few more books we have coming out in the next few months. First up, I'm going to start with Until Death. A woman finally agrees to marry the man of her mother's dreams, only to discover that wedding planning will eat you alive. Until Death manages to be both a brilliant send-up of all that is maddening about wedding planning, while delivering heart and eerie vineyard, horror, and romance. Next is The Missed Connection. From the best-selling wonderful Tia Williams. This is a tried and true romance. When a chance encounter sends sparks flying, Sasha Cruz will do everything she can to track down the mysterious seatmate she met on the plane. Next is The Broken Hearts Agency. Clarence Haynes' debut novel, The Ghosts of Gwendolyn Montgomery, got rave reviews from Kirkus, PW, Booklist, and this is his sophomore romantasy, serving up spicy romance, titillating mystery, and otherworldly horror for fans of Sylvia Moreno Garcia and Alex Jennings. Next is Big Stick Energy, hockey romance. If you are like me, heighted rivalry takes part of almost every conversation that you've had in the last month. From the best-selling author of the WAG series comes a fabulously fun and saucy romance with fake dating for fans of Mariana Zapata and Elle Kennedy. Next is main characters, which I loved. This is when Carla and Seb first crossed paths in the 20s. It's the start of something very exciting. It's this set over the course of 2 decades, and their love story unfolds through the eyes of the people who surround them. So one chapter will be from a parent, then the next chapter might be from a street performer who sees them, and the next chapter might be from a sibling or a teacher. It's very cleverly done. It's great for book clubs and for fans of David Nichols and Sally Rooney. Excuse me. And last for me is the good parts. The good parts will bring up very big emotions, similarly to Me Before You or One Day. It's told in alternating timelines. His is from the present, and hers is from the past because she has altered her memories. We follow what happens when they meet again and learn to let go while holding on to what is worth keeping. And that is it for me. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Annie. I'm going to start with a quick look back at some January to March titles. The Encore by Juliet Eizon offers readers a backstage pass to the rewards of chasing a dream and love's possibilities for redemption. Unread in the year 2022, author Oliver James went on TikTok and said, "What's up? I can't read," but then made the decision to learn to read as an adult, and this is his full story through 21 key books. Cocina Puerto Rico, Chef Mia Castro beat Bobby Flay and collected the recipes that represent her family's homeland for you to recreate in your kitchen. And most of us can't afford a private chef, but with social media darling Riley Meehan to tell you secrets he uses to impress his clients and a little bit extra, it will feel like you can. Thanks again to Laura Piper Lee. Her book, Potshot, again comes out in May of 2026. Next is Vervain Hollow by Katrina Silvey. 2 years ago, our protagonist Laura was in a cult, but when that house in the Hollow burned down with their cult leader trapped inside, Laura had nowhere to go but back home, and despite the trauma of time in the cult, found herself longing for him. Soon after, she learns that one of the other acolytes has been lured back to the Hollow by a message from the thought-to-be-dead cult leader. As Laura ventures back to the House of Nightmares to find the truth, she soon realizes that the dynamics of control and manipulation can still blossom. White Rabbit. In a house on the edge of Massachusetts Bay, 11-year-old Penelope Willows is living with loss. Her father is gone, and her mother drifts further away each day, lost in her own grief. Penelope keeps it together by clinging to her own routines, but this is no ordinary house. It once belonged to the poet Sylvia Plath, and her presence lingers, her ghost becoming an unexpected companion to Penelope as she begins to hear the echoes of Plath's poetry in the wind, feel her sadness, and see her ghost in the mirrors. Now haunted by her father's absence and the ghost of Sylvia Plath, Penelope must navigate oceans of memory, madness, and the fear that she too could be lost. This is a dazzling story about childhood, reality versus imagination, and resilience. If you're coming to the PLA conference, you can meet Abigail there. For the first time in the U.S., Union Square is putting in print the 17 titles in Peter Granger's UK detective series, centering on Detective D.C. Smith, the widower who can't imagine not being on the job. His books have sold over 1 million copies in ebook and audio formats. The program includes Book 1, An Accidental Death, which got a PW star recently, all the way up to the 17th, a new book in the series called Some Sort of Justice, starring female detective Kara Freeman, slated for June 2026 publication. Lastly, in cookbooks just announced this week, the second book by New York Times bestselling author Caroline Chambers called Make It Fast. It is the follow-up to her smash hit, What to Cook When You Don't Feel Like Cooking. Here are new delicious recipes made in just 30 minutes. My friends, those are the books, and that's the way it is today, Thursday, February 26th, 2026. On behalf of Annie Mazes, myself, and our authors, Laura Piper Lee and Jenny Holliday, I say farewell for now, and we hope to see you for the next episode of Booked and Buzzy. Have a lovely day.